What's going on, guys? Thought I'd do something different. Thought I'd, go on a rant, kind of podcasty. Don't have a name for it. Um, Really, I just wanted to go over some topics about video game industry, how I feel about retro gaming currently, things I'm collecting, just different things like that. So, yeah, currently, right now, I feel like current day video games. I mean, even back to 2023, even even maybe back to 2022. I haven't really bought much, especially physical. I bought a PS5. Even with that, I waited. I believe, 2 years after launch. So 2022 is when I bought my PS5. And no, I take that back. I bought it around 2021, maybe like middle 2021. I really wanted to play Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. So I went ahead and bought the PS5 just for that. I didn't really care about Demon Souls, even though that was like one of the two only. Well, and I think Spider Man as well were like exclusives around that time. And so yeah, I wanted to play Rift Apart. I really enjoyed that game when it came out, but to me, I felt like it just wasn't enough for the PS5. It was a very great game. It was a nice visually looking game, but to carry a whole console off of a franchise that came out on the PS2, once I was playing it, I realized like, yeah, there just needs to be something more visually appealing, and I think God of War, being that franchise that could have been the PS5 game, which it did obviously go onto the PS5, but something that utilized the hardware better than, Ratchet and Clank could have. I believe, it's visually stunning game on the PS4. Now, if it was built for the PS5 at the time, I feel like if you release the first one on the PS4 and then release the second one as like a PS5 exclusive, I think you would have gotten or got a lot of people on board uh, specifically for that game. And I think that's where PlayStation kind of fell short with that specifically. But yeah, so that's the PS5. Xbox, I bought an Xbox Series S close to around launch. I really didn't care for the X. I'm not a digital only guy, but I felt at the time that Game Pass was a fucking insane deal at that time, and you get a whole console for strictly Game Pass. I thought that was a crazy deal for the price that I paid for the console. I was on PC at the time, but I wasn't as hardcore on PC. So having that Xbox really gave me the opportunity to try out a lot of games that I just didn't want to buy. So that's 100% why I wanted the S. The S didn't last very long in my collection or just in my game room. I never freaking played it. It collected dust. It looked cool, I guess. Uh, Other than that, I had no real use for it once I got into the PC. So once I started, really playing the PC and having access to Game Pass, there was no need for the Xbox. I mean, yeah, the Xbox did have some games that were console exclusive, I believe, but there weren't anything that was gonna make me turn on my Xbox, which is sad to say. And at the same time, I was the same for the PlayStation. I had no desire to play the PlayStation. So, and also too, I've never really been a big Xbox guy. I have obviously recently got Xbox 360 and Xbox. I've so far early stages, maybe like the last 4 or 5 months, the the library is insane. The library is absolutely insane. I'm not even at scratching the surface of both, uh, you know, what do you call it? Like the games that are just on the consoles exclusively, maybe not even exclusive, just games that I've never heard of that were on the Xbox that I don't have on PlayStation. I've never heard of on PlayStation, and I pick them up on Xbox. They're 360. But yeah, so that's the state of those two consoles. Now the Switch, oh my God, I was a Switch enthusiast. I was a Switch diehard. I was a Switch day one. I was there day one, 2017. I was there picking up my Switch. I was there playing Breath of the Wild. I was there playing all the indies with no other really games we had at the time of launch. I mean, we really had Skylanders, Legend of Zelda, and Bomberman. So, I definitely would call myself a Switch enthusiast all the way up until around the same time I'm speaking of 2022. Uh, it really changed for me. The Switch, I feel personally fell off a cliff. Like it was, I mean, everything Switch. I didn't want to do anything outside of the Switch. It was, if it's on the Switch, I'm buying it. If it's not on the Switch, I'm not. That's how much of an enthusiast I really was for the console. Uh, but I can't really pinpoint exactly what happened for me. I want to say around the time that Metroid Dread and like Scarlet and Violet were coming out, I just didn't have any desire to play these games that were, I've heard they're amazing games. Besides Scarlet and Fire, Scarlet and Violet being, a crap show, just totally missing the mark, being, buggy and all this. I didn't care for the generation of Pokemon. There's maybe a handful of Pokemon that I think that are kind of cool. Other than that, I never had a desire to play it. But if we go back a generation into Sword and Shield, that was a generation everybody was, I felt like, really talking down on. It was terrible. The trees, I don't know if y'all remember the tree incident. Everybody cared about these dang trees. Oh, but they look like they all look the same. Who really, I'm never looking at trees unless it's like a specific uh point of the game to be on the great Deku tree, but I don't look around for trees. So that didn't really bother me. But anyways, I love that game. Me and my friends, we really we really enjoyed that game. I mean, me and my friend, we 100% it. 100% of the game, 100% of the Pokédex. We did the DLC. We did, Legendary Hunt. I believe we 100% the DLC locations as well. I love that game. That game was amazing to me. But it fell short for a lot of people, which I guess maybe people didn't like the Gigamaxing or Dynamaxing, which I mean, I guess yeah, in some aspects of it, it really didn't change much to the gameplay that much. It was cool to see the Pokemon in those forms, which is pretty cool. And then I know Scarlet and Violet has I don't even know what those forms are called, like those crystal forms they turn into and all that. That I like I said, I've never gotten to the game, so I can't say exactly the mechanics of that game, but it never appealed to me. And that's about the time that, like I said, I stopped caring for a lot of the Switch exclusives. And when I go around to my friends and people who were diehard Switch fans like me, I feel like we all fell short around the same time. I don't know why that is. Again, I think a lot of the times it was maybe the games or the direction that Nintendo was kind of going with everything. Also too, another game that I never cared of, Tears of the Kingdom. I've never played it to this day. I've never played it. I played Breath of the Wild. I loved Breath of the Wild. Like I said earlier, it was great. One of the greatest games I've ever played. But then, when we started hearing about Tears of the Kingdom, the trailers and all that, it was cool, but I felt like I played the game, and I know that's hypocritical because I haven't played the game, and there's so many different aspects to the game that I haven't realized yet because I haven't played it. And uh, to me, I just feel like going back to the core game from Breath of the Wild, and then going back to it, it just didn't appeal to me. It wasn't something that seemed cool to me. Building all these objects and to get around and being crafty and all that, it just didn't appeal to me. And to me, I love crafting games. I like stuff like that. But in a Zelda game, it just didn't seem right. It didn't fit right with me. Uh, for that to be implemented in the main part of the game itself. So yeah, so with Zelda being another reason why I feel like after that too as well, I feel like we were just going, I don't know, say downhill. Nintendo was not going downhill with these games. They weren't appealing to me. And like I said, I know a lot of people around me, my friends and stuff, they kind of agreed, our Switch is gained dust. They sat in the docks, and I think at the time as well, we were waiting for the Switch Pro. We were waiting for the Switch Pro, and we were high on the Switch Pro. We would, you know, watch all these videos and possibilities and discussions, and I think that's really what it was. Is I was just so kind of done with the Switch product that I wanted something better, and we did kind of get something better. The OLED, I enjoyed my OLED. I really, to this day, I love my OLED. It did make the games look a lot better, but again, it wasn't a Switch Pro, and I think that's what fell off. Was I was just ready for a better hardware. I was ready for things to run better and not have a Vaseline smear effect, or oh well, this got cut, or the game's on there, but you don't have an open world, like Hogwarts, or just all these things that they had to cut corners around just to get the game to run on the Switch. It just wasn't worth it to me anymore. And 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, honestly, the game was on the Switch. I got it. I played it. Oh well, we cut corners, whatever. Who cares? But whenever the new product started coming out, you got the PS5, you got the Xbox, people are getting PCs. It kind of just killed the vibe for the Switch. And then the Steam Deck also as well. You had the portable PCs and things like that. You had the retro handhelds coming out as well. And Nintendo was falling behind on their NSO. You only get a handful of games that they pick for you. And yes, there are some amazing titles on NSO, but we kind of just stopped. And that was another reason also too that was so cool at the time. We were getting all we had a time frame. We had, oh man, we're getting NSO games. We're getting, Sega game or yeah, Sega games and NES games, SNES games, N64 games, Game Boy Advance, like all these great systems. And you look on there now and you're like, there's a million games you can choose from on the Game Boy Advance alone, which is again an amazing console, and we have nothing on it. There's literally like I think maybe 10 games on there. And how is that? You know? And, and that's another thing that just kind of Nintendo kind of just stopped caring. So if y'all stop caring, why am I gonna keep caring about paying for a subscription service that you don't care for, and then yeah, you every once in a while they'll throw you a bone and oh yeah, here's the Animal Crossing DLC that if you have NSO it's free. Oh, here's another DLC if you have NSO it's free. You know, okay, like that to me that also was kind of weird to add to NSO. I mean, it was cool at the time because I was a big Animal Crossing player. I love Animal Crossing, but it didn't move the needle for me. I wasn't going around talking about how great NSO was because they added some DLC packs that you could get for free. You know, for anybody who's, for the Switch 2 though, people who have the Switch 2, NSO may be a better product for them since, they got GameCube. I know they ain't got many GameCube games, but they do have GameCube on it. So that gives you, I mean, insane games to play play with for hours, and it could be worth that. But to go back to the Switch Pro thing, uh, yeah, I just think that it came a time where I was kind of done with the product that Switch had at the time. Like I said, and when we started hearing about the Switch 2, we finally were like, oh, like they're actually making a successor like to it. I think everybody was kind of done. They waited so long. I think a lot of the people uh, that were diehard Switch fans, like it had just been so long to never get a Switch Pro to only get a Switch 2. And as we're gonna continue talking about the Switch into the Switch 2. I don't own a Switch 2. Uh, this goes right back into me on the 2022 thing. I kind of fell off. I got the OLED. I played games here and there. I heard about the Switch 2. We found out what the Switch 2 was. It's a Switch, and it's the second one. So the screen's bigger. The Joy Cons are a little bigger. Oh, you can use it has mouse capabilities for the Joy Cons. Uh, cool. No OLED screen. We're going back to a LED screen. Yes, I've heard that the screen is a lot better than the original Switch screen, LED screen, but it's still an LED screen. And I feel like that was two steps backwards. Yeah, we're getting a successor, but we're gonna go back to a worse looking screen and charge, you know, way more than what a Switch was. Obviously, yes, there's better hardware in there, makes things run better, but not enough for me to make the Switch my main console. Not to For me to go out and spend all this money for no exclusives really. Donkey Kong Bonanza looks amazing. I'm missing out on Donkey Kong Bonanza. I really do want to play that game. But Mario Kart World, come on, man. Mario Kart World, that compared to Mario Kart 8 is lame. Like who cares you get to drive around an open world? And then they added tricks to drive on this. Like, come on, man. Like that I feel like yes, it was an evolution. It was a definite evolution to Mario Kart. As Mario Kart goes on, they add a little something. They add a new gimmick. They add, different courses. They take courses from the past and remake them and all that. Mario Kart 8 was the Mario Kart. I feel like that was the Mario Kart that to this day you could claim that Double Dash is better than Mario Kart. The N64 Mario Kart's the best. Whatever your preference is, the Wii Mario Kart's the best. But Mario Kart 8 is the Mario Kart. It has almost every course you've ever seen. And, I'm not saying that literally, but I mean, I can't remember how many exact courses they had, but when you include DLC into the game, I mean, it's absolutely absurd how many courses that you get. You get courses from pretty much every Mario Kart that's ever existed, plus Mario Kart Tour. Like, so Mario Kart World, we're starting like a whole new thing. Again, I'm not familiar with the courses and all that on Mario Kart, but how can it hail to Mario Kart 8? It, I know this is bias, or yeah, I guess I could say bias, but because I've played hundreds of hours of Mario Kart 8 and none of Mario Kart World. So, maybe, when I give it a chance, I'll, oh yeah, this is why and this whatever. But as it stands now, Mario Kart 8, either way, isn't gonna get me to go and buy a Switch 2. I'm not gonna go buy a Switch 2 for that. Like I said, Donkey Kong Bonanza looks amazing. Looks awesome. I know I would love that game. Again, as much as I love Donkey Kong, I just don't feel like that also moves the needle for me. Metroid Prime 4, we've all been waiting for this game for years. Years. They announced it in what, 2017 E3, I believe. We got the piece of the Metroid Prime 4 logo. Then they restarted Metroid Prime 4. Then they finally put out Metroid Prime 4 all these years later. And then, it's lackluster from what I understand. Again, I'm speaking from someone who actually hasn't played the game. But from whatever I've seen of the game, it doesn't seem like Metroid Prime to me. I played Metroid Prime 1. I played Metroid Prime 2. I played Metroid Prime 3. Other M. I'm a Metroid Prime fan. I'm a Metroid fan. But Metroid Prime 4, it just, what is it? Yeah, it seems like a Metroid Prime adjacent game. Like, yes, it is Metroid Prime. Yes, it has the mechanics of Metroid Prime, but they added so much and bike sequences and all this stuff. And it's like, what do, like, again, I'm speaking of someone who hasn't played the game. So I'm just saying from my, general understanding of, having a reason to buy the Switch 2, it hasn't happened to me. And that's just where I am in the state of the Switch in general. My personal opinion, I wish Nintendo would have went with something that was uh more home console. I've been hearing things that they may get into uh a primary home console version of the Switch 2. Uh, I do love the aspect of the Switch. Like I can pick it up, I can go somewhere with it, I can continue to play. But what I'm referring to is I wish they would have continued with the Switch as a separate SKU from a home console. Uh, we had the fun with the Switch, switching in and out and all that, and you can continue to keep the Switch uh, as a SKU. But I think having a dedicated home console, having something like a GameCube, uh, a Wii U, a 64, whatever, I think that's kind of what I want from Nintendo, and that's not something what I got. Something dedicated, and you can continue. Like I said, you can continue to keep the Switch as a handheld, mostly. But yeah, that's where I am on the Switch. I have been keeping up with the directs. I always do. Again, I'm still a huge Nintendo fan. I love Nintendo. I'll always love Nintendo. I grew up with Nintendo. So regardless if I don't have a Switch 2 or not, I still keep up with Switch news. I just really would like to see what they have coming in 2027, 2026, 2027. Everything that's been announced, even to this day, you know, there's nothing, there's nothing for me. They just recently added an Animal Crossing update. Great, cool. I love Animal Crossing, like I said earlier. Uh, what's another? I'm trying to think of like big Switch titles that people are waiting for. First party. I know the Switch, or no, Splatoon 3 is coming at some point. I know they've like soft announced that, like, oh yeah, I don't know if they've shown a title of it or like officially. I think they did, but I'm not a big Splatoon fan. I know Splatoon is a huge, huge following, but I've never really cared for it. It is a cool game. I played it on the Wii U. Uh, I've never owned it on the Switch 2, but I have played it on the Switch 2. I mean, on the Switch. On the Switch. I played Splatoon 2 on the Switch, but it was never my game. Uh, but yeah, that's the state of modern games for me. I am on PC avidly. I have no comments on the PC, really. I mean, the PC, if you own a PC, if you don't own a PC, you know how that goes. Steam sales, there's always a lot of pros and cons to owning a PC, upgrading it all the time. You're having to figure out a lot of like how to get games to run, things like that. That can get annoying. So people who don't want a PC, I understand it. Like optimizing a PC to run games, it's I'm not gonna say it's hard. It's not hard. It's just it can get annoying sometimes figuring out optimizations and fixing your settings to make things run. Higher. How many hertz is your monitor? How many frames can your GPU put out? Just all that. Some people don't want that. They just want a console, plug it in, play, and it runs. And so I get that part of it, but yeah, that's where I'm at with modern games. Now, getting into retro games, I love, I've always, well, I should say I've always loved games since I was a kid. I can't say I loved retro games at the time because at the time they weren't retro games, they were just games. But I've always loved games in general. So I have a lot of nostalgia for games that maybe people just don't really care for nowadays. Like people have maybe outgrown those games or never heard of them or just don't care, like generations now, for these games. But for me, I've always liked the hunt for games, finding things that I've never heard of outside of the things that I love. I know I love Mario. I know I love Zelda. I've played mostly all those games. Not all of them, but I've played all mainline, 3D Marios. I've played mostly all mainline Zelda. Uh, just to talk about like two specific franchises, Luigi's Mansion and Mario 64, just random, you know, Nintendo titles. I've played them. But getting into the retro games though, like I said, I think a lot of people are starting to look back into retro games. Uh, I know a lot of friends of mine, we continue to play retro games. I have a friend that's currently playing God of War. You know, I have a friend right now that's playing Sly Cooper. So retro games, I feel right now are what people want. They want to revisit those gems that they remember as kids, or maybe you missed a God of War game. Like Chains of Olympus or was it Ascension? Those were on the PSP. Those games most people didn't play. I haven't played them. I've actually never really played a God of War. The only God of War game I've actually played was the one on the PS4. That was the only God of War game I've ever touched. So, yes, I know I got to go, get back into those. Yeah, and I will. I'm going to revisit those games when I find them. But I think retro games, though, is in a really weird spot. A lot of people are, I think, getting back into it. Maybe people who were into it, in the past kind of gave it up. They're noticing modern games really just isn't it right now. And then want to get back into those games again. Or like me, or that is me primarily. Like I am that demographic. I am that person. But also too with retro games, I feel like having the physical media of the game. And that's what we're going away from in modern is physical versions of games. And Nintendo right now is like teeter-tottering on, yeah, we're still physical, but it's digital, but you get a game card, like the game key card thing. Like, yeah, because they know a lot of their customers, they know a lot of us, we love physical games. So we're not going to stop selling physical games because a large portion of those fans buy physical games. But if you can cut corners with a game key card, you know, I think a lot of, well, I don't think, Xbox or PlayStation will get into that, but I think that's the last stop before digital media completely takes over. And that's a sad, that's a sad thing for me. Like I grew up my whole life getting a Game Boy Advance game, a GameCube game. We're getting the box. You're tearing the plastic off of the game. You're reading the manual. You're excited to play the game. Put it in your console. Like You know nothing about the game. Maybe you saw it in a magazine at one point, the only, time you've ever seen it. You've never seen a commercial of it. But nowadays, kids and teenagers and young adults don't care. They don't care about that. Like, who cares? They can look up a review for a game that they just heard of, they've never heard of, and or they can go into a GameStop or go into a game store or purchase on Amazon or Walmart, look up a game review at the exact same time and determine if they want to buy it or not. So it's just a different generation. It's a different world that we live in now that people just don't care about physical media. That's for all entertainment. No one cares about DVDs. No one cares about, like I said, games, CDs. The one big market right now, if you want to consider it a big market, is vinyl. I also collect vinyl as well. I love old vinyl. I love new vinyl. Vinyl is, I'm glad vinyl is here to stay, and it's kind of grounded its foot currently. Like, yeah, you can expect that band that you like, that, musician that you like, the singer, to put out a record that's on vinyl, at least for a limited time. You can have an opportunity to buy it, you know, or it could be worldwide. It's just you can buy it anywhere, like Taylor Swift. She puts out her vinyl on Target, and you always have an opportunity to purchase her records. But back to what I was saying, I think retro games are very much gonna head and are gonna start peaking up, which for me is it's not great because I like buying things on the cheap. I like finding games under 20, how many games can I get for 20 kind of thing. And hopefully, this isn't something that is a trend that moves in the wrong direction for us. People who want to own games that we want or something new, because that kind of keeps us from purchasing them. And, there's also the emulator route. Yeah, I use emulators. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not 100% physical media purist, but I do want to own the physical disc before I upscale it on the emulator. Like, I want to know that I have it. I want to know that I can put it in my PlayStation 2 and it boots up and plays. And, if I'm going to play a single player experience, yeah, I want it to upscale. Yeah, I want it to look better. I want it to look nicer visually. But I can appreciate the games that are, just in their, visual fidelity, the way it was meant to be played. I don't have a problem with it, but if I have an opportunity to upscale the game to a higher quality, then I definitely will. But yeah, we have emulators and things like that. I don't knock anybody who finds a game they've never heard of and takes a picture of it and goes and emulates it on a GameCube. That's cool. That's cool to me. That's fine with me. You've got someone into a game, maybe a franchise that they've never heard of, and maybe they will go out look for that game, or maybe they should have bought that game and they'll go and you know re-find it or put it on the list to pick it up at a later date. So I think retro games it'll always be here. I think retro games, and I'm speaking all the way back. Let's call it how it is. PS3, Xbox 360, those are retro games, buddy. If you're still, oh well, no, those systems are pushing some age now. And I saw a video, I saw a guy, and I kind of agree a little bit that early PS4, man, like, I'm not gonna say it's retro, but it's pushing up, and I kind of get nostalgic for the PS4 myself. You know, I think you can make an argument that early PS4 games are kind of nostalgic. And the PS4 itself, I love the UI and the PS4, the little subtle background music that would play. It's kind of nostalgic from whenever I was right there at the tail end of my high school. That was the console that I kind of got. Like, that was the first console that I remember that I purchased. Like, I purchased myself. I bought that console when it came out. Not when it came out, but around the time it came out. And it's kind of nostalgic for that reason. I don't necessarily say it's nostalgic from like, me owning a Game Boy Advance nostalgic, but it's definitely nostalgic to me for that reason. Just because that, it was the first console that I purchased. So I recently bought a PS4 and I literally just sat there and listened to the UI music. And I was like, dang, man, I think I played near, not near Automata, but near Replicant, uh, on the PS4, which this isn't, a nostalgic game, unless you played near from the 360, which I did do, but I played near Replicant because I think I found it for a pretty cheap price. So I was like, let me pop that in and, just run the PS4. And yeah, I just let that music play and kind of went through the UI, the store, and I think I don't know about PS5 because like I said, I got it, but I didn't really mess with the UI on it. I really don't care. I didn't really care for the PS5 UI, but whenever I was messing with it, I was like, oh yeah, you could on the PS4 you could have like backgrounds and like it would change like the whole UI. I had one that was Kingdom Hearts, and so whenever you moved around, it sounded like you were in the menus in Kingdom Hearts, which I always thought that was dope. That was like my primary PS4 background. Uh, but yeah, back to the retro games. uh, I think it's in a good state. Currently, I think if you're looking for something specific, rather than be now, if you're a GameCube guy, you're looking for GameCube games, whether that be Pikmin or just the classics, Wario's World, like something like that. Yeah, buddy, you just get ready to spend a lot of money. But I mean, I'm not a lot of money, but well over what you expect that to be. I believe I believe Pikmin 2 is at around 80, and I think I I want to say Wario's World's about 90, maybe 100, pushing 100. Not too sure. I think trying to think what else. They're all the games are pretty holding their value. The GameCube games, like I mean, if they're not, they're like minimum like 30, 40, $50, for like the big titles like your Mario Sunshines, your Luigi's Mansions, like first party titles. They're all holding value. So, that's there. But if you're looking for like, oh, I want to get back into or I just want to discover, get back into like Xbox 360, or OG Xbox or the 360, the PS2, the PS3, the PSP, uh, you know, those consoles, the Wii, there are some, well, for every console, there's some, big titles that are expensive. That's every console. But for getting your foot in the door for games that you've never heard of, or you know, trying to go back to those classics that you remember, you're not going to be spending much money. I was looking at the Fable games. I've never played the Fable games on the Xbox or the 360. Looking at the Fable games, I'm like, wow, like these aren't worth much. They're highly regarded games, highly regarded games, but they're not really expensive. Even like Blue Dragon, which is, you know, uh, I know it's a highly talked about RPG on the 360, and it's like 20 something bucks. We are Katamari. If you're a Katamari fan, they said that Katamari is like the Katamari game, and that Katamari is like 20 bucks. You know, uh, that's just on the Xbox. I'm getting into PS1 too. PS1 is like is like in a weird, like, how do you say it? Like, yeah, you'll find games that are dirt cheap. Like I'm talking about under $5, under $10, well under $20. But then there's like those games that like are absolutely astronomical, and you're like, why is Klonoa like ridiculously expensive? Why, well, I know the answer to that, but I'm saying like, Klonoa, Lunar, like Persona, like any of these like, RPGs, man. If you're a huge RPG fan, I hope you have a huge wallet to match it because RPGs on the PlayStation 1 are absolutely insane. And they're cool. They're cool, like to have, or like if you're gonna actually play it, or like something you've played, you want in your collection, you're a Persona fan, you're like, you know what, I just want to own Persona 1, or I'm, a huge RPG enthusiast. I want to own these early, you know, PS1 RPGs, you know, I understand. But like, but then again, you look on the other side and it's like, you can get Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, for fairly decent. Like they're not expensive games. The OG Final Fantasy 7, I could find that game all day, every day, and I don't believe it's over $20. I know that what helps it is the greatest hits versions of games. If you can find the greatest hits versions and you don't care about that green, cover and the green spine, any game that you're looking for, you're gonna find it under 20. It's like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, uh, Final Fantasy 7. I don't know if Final Fantasy 8 or 9 are greatest hits. They probably are. Uh, you could easily find those, but Xbox though, from what I understand, everything's cheap. I mean, I really only found one game. I mean, there's a hundreds of games on the Xbox, but from what I've seen, all the Xbox games, they're under 20. I've yet to see a game personally. I know there is, but personally see a game that was over $30 on the Xbox, OG Xbox. And I've been looking through Xbox games, uh, like hardcore for like the last 5 months, and I've seen a lot of titles, and a lot of the titles I've seen, uh, were under $30, under 20. The reason why I haven't picked up a lot of them was because, like, oh, it's kind of common, or, I'm not really in the mood to play it right now. I know I can find it. Same thing with the 360, dirt cheap games, man. Like I was picking up games at not a yard sale, but it was like a sale that goes on around where I live. This guy is like I don't say he's a collector, but I think he goes around, like people sells him stuff, or he buys out lots or something like that maybe. And he was having a sale, and I mean I probably got probably like ten Xbox games. And again, he was running a sale for them. I think it was like you buy four for 20 or something. And some of the games that he was just letting go were like $2, $3, $4 or $5. I've got Lost Odyssey. Not that it's a hella expensive game, but I got Lost Odyssey for like $3. So it's like a lot of people I don't think really care about 360. They're just kind of liquidating the system off right now. I think in the next couple of years, same thing with the PS3, I think in the next couple of years though, that system is gonna is gonna go up exponentially for nostalgia. I think. I'm already kinda, or I am nostalgic, not just for the system. I did have a PS3 uh back in the day. I didn't own it. It was my uncle's. I played a lot of games on it. I played, the Telltale Walking Dead series on it. Heavy Rain I played on it. I'm trying to think what else that I was like heavily playing on. Obviously Call of Duty I was playing on it like a lot. Uh, but when I say nostalgic, I mean more like of people who like maybe have bought that PS3 and they wanted to go return back to it to find those titles again, like God of War 3 and Resistance and a lot of that stuff. I don't think those games will go up insanely high, but I do think that those games will start to climb higher than what they are currently. Those games that I just mentioned, they're not expensive games, but I do think they're gonna start gaining value over the next couple of years. Same thing with the 360. There's a lot of games on the 360 that you would assume would be really expensive, really high dollar just for the sell count, like how much it's sold. You would assume that, but no, like it's still not holding value whatsoever. So I do want to get into the market right now with these games to be able to play them before I don't want to spend the money for them at a later time. And Same thing with the PS2. The PS2 has already gone through their renaissance. You know, they've already gone through their, and I think they still kind of are. I think it's bottling out, where it's like, yes, there's really expensive games on the PS2. There always will be expensive games for PS2. I know we had like a resurgence with that Piglet game. Like, I I believe that game went up like 150%. You know, I know that game was like dollars to the penny, and then it got viral a little bit on TikTok, and then out of nowhere it skyrocketed in price. Uh, just because people wanted to play it, wanted to pick it up. So, you know, I think the PS2, getting into the PS2, you could really get into the PS2 just like I said with the Xbox 360. There's a lot of good titles that I'm picking up currently that, you know, I've paid less than $10 for a lot of them. Uh, and so yeah, those are those consoles. Now, handheld consoles, I I've heard the 3DS. You know, we've all seen the 3DS has gone up in price. There was a 3DS XL, and I think it's because not only is it nostalgic to people, but I think that people never really got into the system whatsoever, and they're realizing like, you know, with the Switch coming, you know, the Switch releasing games for it, primarily like RPGs and stuff that didn't make it off, that are finally coming over to the Switch, are noticing that those are on the 3DS, and the 3DS had a lot of RPGs on it, and a lot of, you know, games that are just stuck on it. You know, like a good notable one that was stuck that recently came over in the last couple of years was Luigi's Mansion 2. I had never played Luigi's Mansion 2, and whenever I got it for the Switch, I was like, man, like I really did miss out on this game. You know, I'm glad I didn't have to use it for the 3D, you know, effects and all that, but it was a good game. It was a really good game, and I've played all the Luigi's Mansions now. At this point, I've played all three of them. So, you know, and I know another good one is that Kirby's Robo whatever. You know, that one's stuck on there, and a lot of people want that game to come over. Which, will it ever? We don't know, but I think that's really what it is. That people didn't get to experience the 3DS and are wanting to experience the 3DS. And the 3DS XL is pretty much like the ultimate way to experience the 3DS. You know, there's no point of really getting a 3DS, the smaller one, if you can have the big screen 3DS. You know, I understand the the uh, the appeal. So I know GameCube, or not GameCube. I know Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, uh, just the Game Boy family. I there's a lot of titles on there that are really expensive. I know if you buy them loose, which 95% of the games that you find for the Game Boys are loose card anyways. But if you're buying them complete in box, which I know a lot of collectors obviously want to do because it makes it look nice. It makes it look nice on the shelf. You have an actual way to display it. Those are expensive, really expensive. I mean, I can understand why with the cardboard boxes. I remember getting Pokemon Emerald. I remember it was like tearing up my box and throwing it away. My mom came with a bag, you know, for Christmas, you know, throw all, you know, the paper and the trash in there. And I had ripped up my Emerald box. I remember, you know, so I'm sure a lot of kids were the same exact way. We didn't care. We just wanted to get to the game, you know, and that's why those boxes are worth gold now. You know, you have a complete box Emerald Game Boy Advance game. Oh my God, you hit a gold mine. Regardless of how beat the box is, people want the box. You know, so if you're getting into that, you know, collecting Game Boy and stuff like that, loose cards cheap, man. Yeah, you'll run into some that are a little bit expensive, but other than that, if you don't mind having loose cards, you know, the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance itself, the SP and all that, they're really not expensive consoles to purchase. They're like a little bit over 100. I can't remember exactly which model is the right model, the backlit model. I know that's the one that people want to. I know that one's a little bit more expensive. That one's like, a little bit in the 120s maybe. But it's still not a bad console to get into if you wanted to just run actual hardware on it. I know if you're running emulators, any computer on the face of the earth will run it. A pregnancy test will run Game Boy SPs at this point now. So, finding titles for it, you can go to any of your local game stores, look at they usually have them in a little plastic, basket or something. Look through the games and take pictures of the ones that look interesting to you and look them up. Maybe you'll find something on there. I know there's a billion hidden gems on the Game Boy Advance because they made so many games for it. Same thing with the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy. So I'm not there yet. I do want to get into that system. There was games that I do remember, like I had a Crash Bandicoot game that I really liked. Uh, I recently played that. There's like a Donkey Kong game, like a climbing game or something that was like terrible. That I've always just wanted to play it though. And Mr. Driller. I think that's on NSO, I believe. I think there's a few Mr. Driller games, but I want to play that one specifically. So whenever I find it, I'll get into it. But yeah, right now retro games. To wrap it up, and modern games. I think right now a lot of people in the gaming community as a whole are just kind of over uh, where retro games are, or where modern games are, and would rather look into the retro side again, or aren't buying those new games whenever they can just go buy a PS4 game from the PS5 that they never played and buy it super cheap. PS4 games are really cheap right now, so I think that's a good reason that people aren't purchasing modern day remakes or remasters or just games in general. I know that's why I'm not. So yeah, this is just really like, I don't want to say a podcast, it's more like a rant, but yeah, I would like to hear y'all's guys' thoughts on that. Whatever, any part of what I was, had been mentioning, modern games, retro games. Are you a retro fan? Are you, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree with what I'm saying. But yeah, guys, if you would like, comment, share, and I would like to hear your thoughts. So yeah, y'all have a good one.